Good evening and a very warm welcome to yet another edition of India Prime. I am Sana Khan. Tonight we talk about two news stories making headlines in the country. A State House committee in Karnataka has asked IT and biotech companies to only employ men for night shifts in the interest of women's security and privacy. We will talk about that later on the show, but first let's turn our attention to the whole Aadhar card confusion. Now, on Aadhar cards, the Supreme Court and the government seem to be at loggerheads yet again, this time on the usage of these Aadhar cards. The Apex Court has maintained its stand that Aadhar cannot be made mandatory by the government for extending the benefits of it to its welfare schemes. Now, the government is making Aadhar compulsory as an authentication tool as well for identification. Citizens are not sure whom to believe. On one side, the government is pushing for it. On the other, the Supreme Court is giving the impression that its use is not compulsory. Here are some reactions that we've got on, for you on this story. Let's try and listen in.
See, the entire Aadhar scheme has been challenged on various grounds. The most important ground is national security. We are saying that this entire system compromises the national security when you have a centralized data, when biometrics don't work. The government's own data is that biometrics, there is so much of duplication, which is the ratio is humongous. No other country in the world is doing this apart from India and Pakistan. And, there is a privacy issue also that is involved. And on the privacy issue, it has been referred to a larger bench.
Most of you believe that biometrics is unique. It is not. And it's not Matthew Thomas saying it. There's huge amount of research done by various organizations, primarily by 4 US national academies. They have come to the conclusion that biometrics is inherently fallible. It doesn't work. And the proof of that is available in the counter affidavit of UIDAI, where they said they have found 80 million duplicates in 800 million enrollments. That means 1 in 10 person is declared a duplicate. So 80 million is a huge number, and it's the proof that why biometrics doesn't work. Most people, judges, advocates, professionals, most people think biometrics is unique. I knew that it is not unique. I had a lot of information on it, and I felt I have fought corruption all my life. You don't need this for any purpose whatsoever, and you make yourself highly vulnerable.
All right, over the next few minutes, we're going to be talking about Aadhar card and the confusion surrounding it. Joining me in the studio is Colonel Matthew Thomas. He's a defense scientist and, more importantly, a petitioner in this case. Now, Colonel Thomas, first of all, thanks so much for joining us. Now, you raised a major concern over here, saying that biometric is not unique, and we understand that. But why do you think there's such a big push from the government side for it right now?
Well, I think it's largely ignorance. Ignorance of technology, ignorance of the use of biometrics, ignorance of databases. Now, whatever I say is not hearsay or my opinion. It's based on scientific evidence and mathematical proofs. Now, one confusion, you used the word Aadhar card. Aadhar is not a card. It is a number in a database, and the UIDA's website itself will say that. But why do we keep on saying Aadhar card, Aadhar card?
Right.
Because people want an identity card. So they said use the acknowledgement, laminate it and use it.
Right.
Now if you say that, you're begging the question. You're first saying that every time somebody should authenticate himself or identify himself or herself with his biometrics, and you're saying use this card.
Right,
so,
and biometrics itself, as you pointed out, is not foolproof.
Yeah, I'd like to read to you just 2 lines from an article in 2010. It says, thanks to gangster movies, cop shows, and thrillers, spy thrillers, people have come to think of fingerprints and other biometrics means of identifying evildoers as being completely foolproof.
Right.
In reality, they are not, never have been. Few engineers who design such screening tools have ever claimed to be so. Yet the myth has persisted among public at large, officialdom in particular. In the process, it has led to a huge waste of public money. Now, this is from an article in The Economist. In 2010.
And it says it all, really. Joining me right now is Supreme Court lawyer Aishwarya Bhati as well. She joins me live from Delhi. Thanks so much, Aishwarya, for joining us here. Now, we heard your soundbite as well just a short while ago. Give us your thoughts on this specific Supreme Court saying that it's not okay to use this unique identification number as far as government welfare schemes is concerned. It's not needed. It's not mandatory.
See, this matter has been pending before the Honorable Supreme Court for some time now, and in fact the matter has been referred to a larger constitution bench. And at the time of first hearing of this matter itself, the Honorable Supreme Court had passed an interim order. The petitioners, we had asked for a stay of the continuous enrollment of the Aadhar. And while not accepting to stay the enrollment of Aadhar, the Honorable Supreme Court had said that to make sure that nobody suffers for not having an Aadhar and nobody is denied any benefits out of any of the government schemes. So that order continues from day one of the hearing of this matter. It was further fortified when the matter got referred to a constitution bench. The constitution bench of this court at the time of a modification application by union heard the entire arguments and said that Aadhar can only be used for these particular schemes while the matter is sub judice, because the court is considering the whole issue of constitutional validity of Aadhar.
Right.
So as an interim measure, they said that it can only be used for these particular schemes, and Aadhar cannot be used to deny, you can't deny anybody benefit out of that.
Right.
What has happened yesterday is only some observations at the time of mentioning, but the earlier orders of the Honorable Supreme Court stand, and they will continue till the time the matter is finally heard by Supreme Court.
All right. Thanks for giving us perspective on that, Aishwarya. But Colonel Matthew Thomas, why at all bring about such a scheme or a unique identification number, which is A, not foolproof, B, the public finds itself absolutely confused at this point in time, but the government still, we believe, wants to go ahead with the Aadhar. Now, what could be the pros of using Aadhar as a unique identification number for the citizens of the country?
First of all, there are no pros. There is no advantage whatsoever. And I think the government and the public, as well as many bureaucrats, have been taken for a ride by the lobbying of corporates who promote this technology. Now, for example, UIDA itself admits in its contract with these biometric solution providers that the database itself is inaccurate. Let me just refer to clause 4.111, paragraph 1 on page 15 of 69 of Annexure E to the contract between UIDA and a certain biometric foreign provider. It says UIDA provides no assurance of its accuracy, of its accuracy of demographic data. Now, if biometrics doesn't work, demographic data is inaccurate, you've got a huge junk database. So how will it be used for any purpose? Now let's take corruption or LPG subsidy.
Right.
Common sense dictates you can find out whether the subsidy is being used for commercial purposes. For example, if somebody is consuming 10 cylinders per month, he's obviously not cooking, not even his own goose.
Right.
So obviously it doesn't work. Secondly, even if you transfer this money into a bank account, nothing stops the person from using the cylinder in his auto rickshaw or in his car. Where has his subsidy gone? So neither transferring by cash nor restricting this can stop the use of the misuse of the cylinder.
All right. Aishwarya, also, now the Supreme Court for now has said one thing about Aadhar not being mandatory in case of social welfare schemes, but also said that government cannot be stopped from making it mandatory for non-benefit purposes. Now, we're also hearing that it will be mandatory for filing tax returns, for making the PAN cards, booking a railway ticket also perhaps in the near future. Can we see a situation in which the Supreme Court decides to completely do away with a scheme which is not foolproof at all?
Yeah, well, the entire scheme is challenged, being unconstitutional on various grounds. And Colonel Matthew sitting with you is one of the petitioners. I'm appearing for him in Supreme Court. The issues that we have challenged this on in Supreme Court, there are lots of petitions that are pending. This is one petition. And essentially the issues on which it is challenged is national security. And, you know, consolidation of data like this is actually being counterproductive, and we will end up making our country's security more vulnerable. There is also issues, huge issues with regard to implementation and contracts that Colonel Matthew has pointed your attention to. There is also another issue of privacy of a citizen, privacy of an individual. In fact, on the issue of privacy being a fundamental right, it has been referred to a larger constitution bench. And of course, when the matter is pending before the Honorable Supreme Court, it could go either way. And right now there are interim orders which are in place, and they categorically lay down that it should not be made mandatory for anything.
But you are also challenging the complete validity of Aadhar, isn't it?
Only after a very considered hearing, both sides. Of course, the main challenge in the petitions is the entire Aadhar system. We have said that this Aadhar authority is completely misplaced, and our prayer there is for destruction of this entire data that has been collected.
All right, Aishwarya. Now, Colonel Matthew Thomas, give us a sense of what the citizen is actually looking at. One might find themselves completely confused, with what's happening. The government saying one thing, the Supreme Court saying another thing. And the BJP, remember, it was against, while it was in the opposition, it was against the Aadhar idea in the very first place. What has changed, according to you, that the BJP is so pro and it really wants to go ahead with this scheme?
I think a lot of people in the government have been misled, and I would even say fooled into believing that this can work wonders. They need to understand that it just cannot work, and the countries from where we are borrowing this so-called technology, the United States, they themselves have not implemented the act. And people get confused because of these confusing signals from the court, from the government, and so on. What changed? Simple answer is, in fact, I did campaigning for the BJP in one sense. I spoke at some of the election meetings on this kind of scheme. What changes? I think they have been misled, and I think they have misled the Prime Minister himself, and it's very dangerous to do that. So my request would be that this should be relooked at, and one should change this entire thing and scrap it totally. The more dangers, which my advocate was mentioning, is the national security angle.
Right.
You don't put all your eggs into one basket. Here we are not only gathering the entire data into one.
But the authenticity of the data is another big question. Addresses can be forged. You can pay a certain amount and get an Aadhar card.
I just read the contract clause where UID itself says that data is not accurate. If biometrics doesn't work, Aadhar is not a card.
The data is not accurate.
Right. How can you use it as KYC? And more importantly, this number which they are allocating is for all residents. How do you distinguish between a resident and a citizen? You can't. So will you give benefits? For example, a non-citizen, can he use this number and the so-called Aadhar card and open a bank account? Then because biometrics is not unique, a person can have multiple accounts. A Khalistan terrorist, an ISI terrorist were caught and found they have more cards. So Bangladeshi illegal immigrants, contract workers in the sub-area in Bangalore, where I come from, were caught, and they are illegal immigrants. They have these Aadhar numbers.
Right.
So illegal immigrants can come in, spies can come in, the data is inaccurate. I think the government should relook at it and re-examine it, and more importantly, to see how we can prevent national security from being threatened.
Absolutely.
That's what
I'm guessing you certainly didn't go to get your Aadhar number.
I never will. Oh, my dead body.
All right, and I've lost mine in its physical form. So
Wonderful.
Let's see.
Wonderful.
There is a lot of confusion at this point in time. What's going to be the fate as far as the unique identification number or this Aadhar scheme is concerned? Does the government perhaps need a serious rethink on this whole scheme altogether? And what can the Supreme Court say in its rulings, which is now being heard by a larger bench? I'd like to thank Ms. Aishwarya Bhati, also Colonel Matthew Thomas, for joining me this evening on the show. Thank you once again, sir, for joining us here.
Me. God bless you.
All right, we're taking a short break. More news and updates on the other side. We're going to be talking about the latest that is happening in Bengaluru city in Karnataka as far as women techies are concerned. Don't go anywhere.